Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, this is the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. I'm here with one of my favorite friends, mentors, people, grandfather kind of figures. How are you, John? It's John Chancellor from Teach the Soul.
I'm doing well. And how are you?
I'm good. So tell me, you have a topic you wanted to talk about today, which I thought was a great idea, but why don't you introduce it?
I want to talk about discomfort, and I'll introduce it with a little quote, and it's, the better you're able to handle discomfort, the more comfortable life becomes. And that seems like a bit of a paradox, that if you're better able to handle discomfort, the more comfortable you'll be. But honestly, don't think there's anything that an individual can do that will improve their life better than getting good at handling discomfort.
Why do you say that, and how do you recommend we do that?
Well, I say it because our human brain is programmed, hardwired to move away from discomfort. And that means that we don't do a lot of the things that we should be doing, need to be doing, could be doing to make life better. So we move away from things, we move away from the discomfort, and it builds on itself.
I agree with you, but just for perfect clarity, what are some of those things?
Let me address one other topic first, and then in doing that, we'll talk about the other things. I think that there are three broad areas of discomfort in our life. The first is things that we don't do because we find them a little frightening. The second is things that we do or don't do because we have a poor calculation on the timing difference between the good we're going to get out of it and what it's going to cost us. And the third thing that causes this discomfort is things that happen that involve us that are totally beyond our control. Now, going back to the first topic, things that we don't do because of fear. That could be having a difficult conversation with a coworker or friend, a loved one. We will often avoid talking about confrontational subjects because we're afraid of what might happen. You know, we won't ask for a promotion. We won't seek out a job promotion at work. We won't try to improve our life. Public speaking is one of the things that everybody fears because we're afraid we're going to embarrass ourselves. We're going to be humiliated. So we don't do a lot of things in life based on fear. And one of the primary functions of the mind, the brain, is to protect us as individuals. But the fear that our great ancestors used as an asset was physical danger. We no longer have the multitude of physical dangers that our prehistoric ancestors had. Now the dangers are social. They're dangers to our ego, to our feelings. Those are things, though, that we don't do out of fear.
Can I add a couple?
Oh, absolutely.
I think that characteristic of most of those was that they involved having difficult interactions with other people. But I also think that we might avoid things like getting your will done. If my dad hadn't been frightened of it, we would have been in a much better situation after he passed. Going to the dentist or the doctor, giving up chocolate, getting ourselves to exercise, we're fearing the discomfort. I don't know if those all fit into the categories.
A couple of those fit into the second category, but I'll be quick to admit that there is generally some overlap between the first and second category.
Okay.
But the second type of discomfort we cause ourselves is things we do or don't do because of the timing difference between the cost and the benefit of doing it. And the cost is not in dollars and cents. The cost is in time, energy, emotion, health, that sort of thing. And that's where going to the gym, that's an immediate cost and long-term benefit. But we don't do it because it's easier not to do. You have to get up early or go later. You go to the gym, and our brain, again, is hardwired to favor the short term. We talk a lot or hear a lot about instant gratification. Our brain is actually hardwired to favor the short term because it really didn't matter what the long-term benefits were if we didn't live to reap them.
Yeah, there were so many threats. Yeah.
Yeah. So we understand very clearly the short-term benefit and we discount very heavily the long-term benefits. So education is poster child for the short-term cost, long-term benefit. A lot of people, after they have the mandatory high school, don't go on and continue their education. And it's because there's an immediate cost, but a long-term benefit, which you don't know when it's going to pay off. And the third type of discomfort is the things that happen that are beyond our control. You get in an accident that's not your fault. A friend fails to meet you at lunch that you had planned. Coworker says something to you ugly at work. Any number of things that happen beyond your control that create discomfort in your life. So those are the kind of three broad areas that we face discomfort in and some examples of them. Does that clear?
It does. In making a decision to have or not have chocolate, for example, have or not have a chocolate bar, does that kind of fall into the second area because we are...
It gives us immediate benefit and the cost is somewhere down the road, the extra weight, the clogged up arteries, all the disadvantages of eating chocolate show up later, but it's cumulative. And if you're continuously eating chocolate, the effect is cumulative and it can be quite severe.
Yeah, very good. So what should we do about this?
You know this very well. The first thing with any issue is to become aware of your behavior, become aware of what you're doing. Are you failing to have that difficult conversation with somebody? Are you avoiding eating healthy because you're not really recognizing the long-term costs of it? Do you get triggered? Do you get upset? Do you fail to do things when something beyond your control happens and that triggers you and makes you do something that you later regret? So the first step is to become aware of it, because until you're really aware of it, not a lot you can do about it. Once you're aware of it, I think it's helpful to ask yourself, what's the driver? That is to say, what category is this in? Is it fear? Am I focused on the short-term benefit and neglecting the long-term cost? Or is this something that's out of my control that I'm trying to control, but I have no control over? So become aware of it and then put it in the category. If it's fear-based, then you can ask yourself some questions. What's the worst thing that can happen? Oftentimes we put off things because of general concern about it, general discomfort about it, but we don't really get down and analyze, okay, if I have this difficult conversation, what's the worst that can happen? What's the likely outcome? What benefit will come from it? We just have this nagging, I don't want to do this right now.
It's amazing how anxiety dissipates when you go through a worst case scenario analysis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If it's fear-based, I think you have to start asking what's the worst that can happen. Is it, how likely is it to happen? What are the benefits that could come from it? Most of the time, we just have this general notion that this is something bad. This is something that's unpleasant. This is something I don't want to do. And the problem with that is that every time you make that decision to put things off, to kick the can down the road, you're training your brain to repeat that pattern. And it becomes a knee-jerk reaction. You automatically go to it, and you don't even recognize then that you're doing that after a while. You just, it's automatic. You just accept that that's the way to do it. So with fear, with any of them, the best thing to do is become aware that you're doing it, then decide, figure out which category it falls in, because you actually approach dealing with it differently. The second type, that's the one I think involves food more.
The timing.
The timing. You have to really get yourself to override your brain on the long-term cost. We know what that triple chocolate cake tastes like. We know what it's, how it tastes and how it's going to make us feel when we have it. But you have to force yourself to say, what is this doing for me long-term? And is this what I'm comfortable with? Is this what I want? Because if you just think about the taste of the chocolate cake right now, we're all going to eat it. If you think, what is this doing for me long-term? What is it doing to my weight? What is it doing to my arteries? What's it doing to my overall health? If you force yourself to really dig into that, it becomes a lot easier to pass on that chocolate cake.
Can I add something there?
Absolutely.
I mean, so first of all, that is what I tell them, that you have to get out of the deprivation trap, because your lizard brain is going to focus you on the short-term deprivation. If you don't have that chocolate cake, you're going to miss out on the mouthfeel and the sugar hit and the delicious taste. And besides, everybody else is eating it, you don't want to miss out on your joyful experience with them. But it's not telling you what it's going to deprive you of in the long term, which is energy and the freedom to be free of worry from cardiovascular risk and, strokes and heart attacks and diabetes and those kind of things, and, joint pain and digestive freedom. Sometimes people just can't do that, no matter how hard we focus, no matter how much they really know. And what I find is that it's helpful to bring the long term more closely to the present. I had a client who said, she asks herself, well, what kind of day do I want to have? Because if I eat the chocolate cake, that's probably not all I'm going to eat. And I'm going to be sitting, sweating and bloated on the couch and miserable and hating myself and cranky with my family. I'm not going to get the same stuff done at work or at home. So what kind of day do I want to have? It's not the immediate impact, but it's pretty close to it. Like 2 hours later, you're going to have a much worse day if you make certain choices than if you make other choices. So, make sense?
That makes perfect sense and a very good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
The third type of discomfort that we have is when things happen that are totally beyond our control. Like I said before, you're in an accident that's not your fault. Well, the first thing I would say is the disappointment comes between our expectation, the gap between our expectations and reality. So the first thing you have to do is say, I had no control over this. This is the facts. This is what happened. I can't change it. You have to accept reality. What happens, so many will go into the if this hadn't happened or if that. We go into the, trying to argue with the universe. That's a no-win situation. Nothing you can do is going to change what happened. So I'm not saying that you have to like it, but you have to accept reality. And a good question to ask yourself is, what do I want? What outcome do I want? I don't like what happened, but what outcome do I want from this? And what do I need to do to ensure that outcome, to give myself the best odds of that happening? We often fail to accept reality. We get caught up in our expectations and why didn't this happen? Why did they do that? We keep asking why. That's not productive at all. The better course of action to say, okay, I understand what happened. Nothing I can do about it. I have to accept it. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad day, get drugged down, and then what happens is you have a coping mechanism that you go to, and it could be food, it could be binge watching TV, constant scrolling on some social media site. You're going to go to that and waste more time and energy in giving up part of your life.
Absolutely. Do you remember what Robin Williams said about reality?
I don't. Right at the moment. Tell me.
He said, reality, what a concept.
Yes. So the thing I would say is our ability to deal with the uncomfortable things that happen to us is a muscle. And it doesn't do any good to go to the gym for one day. If you go to the gym for one day, you've wasted a day. If you go to the gym for a half hour, 5 days a week, you're not going to see a lot of improvement the first week, but after 6 months, you're going to see some real changes in your life.
Yeah.
The same is true with the muscle for dealing with discomfort. One of the things that you could do, anybody could do, is to notice something in your life every day, because we have a lot of things that happen to us every day that we don't particularly like. It's not comfortable. Pick something each day and move toward that discomfort. Don't move away from it. You can sit with it, which means that you just observe it. Don't try to change it. Don't try to flee from it. Just sit with it. Those feelings will pass. If you're going to get better at dealing with discomfort, welcome these little things and deal with them on a day-to-day basis. And if you don't find something that you can deal with, do something that you normally wouldn't do. Create something that's uncomfortable for you so you get good at practicing dealing with discomfort.
Could you give us a couple of examples?
A good thing would be, just if you're uncomfortable talking to people, just say good morning to somebody. If you're walking in the grocery store, department store, say good morning to a person when you pass them. If you're hesitant to make a phone call, pick up the phone and call that person. If you're normally more comfortable texting a person, but it's not appropriate to text, it would be better to have a conversation. It's something that would be better. Pick up the phone and call. That's a good example. The more you get used to doing that, the more comfortable you're going to be doing it. It's going to improve your self-confidence and everything. And what happens is, the more you do of this, it spreads like a ripple throughout your life. Setting boundaries. When somebody violates one of your boundaries, speak up.
I remember the first time that I asked a girl for a date. I was 16 years old, and there was this girl at school, Karen Healy. She wanted to project me, by the way, but that was not the point of the story. I was sitting in my father's office staring at the telephone, and must have been there for an hour. And my dad came in and he said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm trying to get comfortable calling Karen to ask her if she'd go out with me." And he said, "Well, that's the problem." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you're waiting until you feel comfortable, but you're never going to feel comfortable. Sometimes you have to do it and then get comfortable with it afterwards."
Absolutely.
I have to say, I became kind of avoidant about asking girls out in person. I mean, I had a number of dates when I was younger, but I still had the impulse to run the other way. And when I get divorced, thank God for online dating, but when a pretty girl talks to me in public, I've always had the impulse to run the other way.
That would be a good thing to practice. Just stand and talk to her for a couple of minutes.
It's a good idea. What happens if she wants to keep talking to me?
Well, after 5 minutes, you can decide if you want to have a further conversation at some other time. Hey, I'm sorry, I've got to run, but give me your number.
I know. The truth is, I have a date with a woman I'm kind of excited about tonight, so hopefully I don't need to face this for a while at least, but I know what you mean.
I think that we don't notice how much of our life is filled with uncomfortable things. And I think that if we start becoming more aware of it and start moving toward the discomfort, another way of saying that, and we've talked about this before, choose the short pain. When something has to be done, do it. It's like when you were staring at the phone for an hour, the girl's answer is going to be the same. Whether you call her in 1 minute or 60 minutes, her answer is going to be the same. Just do it. Find out what the answer is.
The water isn't getting any warmer while you're waiting to jump in.
That's correct.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. John, this is really helpful. Is there anything I should have asked you about all this that I didn't ask you?
I think that we covered everything pretty well, but if you get some feedback questions, we'll explore it some more.
You got it.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.